suggestions? Any thoughts?
I'd just like to be the first to say thanks for putting together such an excellent presentation. That was amazing, and thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Kel. It was a bit of a team effort. Kel and I had really good reflection that informed a lot of that thinking. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well done. But yeah, feel free to unmute yourself to ask a question now, or if you prefer, you can type it into the chat as well.
Thanks for the congrats from Alana and Marco. It's very sweet.
I have a kind of question for the group that might get things started, but if anyone here has knowledge of other maps, either parkour maps around Australia, or Alana, I'm looking at you, I guess, maybe climbing maps, other forms of mapping that they've been a part of. Has everyone got some other map that they've seen?
In terms of climbing, there's kind of the Crag is what we use in Australia as the go-to website to record climbing routes on. And then they kind of annotate a photo of the cliff, and that shows how you climb. And it's called a topo, but it's not really a topographic map as a geographer would understand it.
Yeah.
But the culture in the comments and the discourse is really vapid. And it's something that absolutely this community wants to do the opposite of in every way possible. So it's like, it's interesting. What do you think, Ali, if there is an opportunity to leave comments? You know, the rule, never read the comments in general on the internet. But what if we had comments? What would happen? I don't know.
Good question.
Yeah, it would be interesting to, I suppose, have different perspectives on a place, because that is, I suppose, one of the other limitations about this map is that, of course, the information that people are going to put in is going to be based on their own experience, which is informed by their identity and the way they move through the world. So, yeah, in that sense, it's what you're having to do is get into the perspective of, into the head of other people to think, oh, well, how can I present this spot in a way that's going to be relevant to the most amount of people? But if you have comments, then I suppose you're starting a discussion. You could start a dialogue around how different people might experience the same place in different ways. I mean, yeah, if it was done in a like moderated way, it would be really interesting. Yeah.
In America, another bit of tea and controversy, their equivalent of the Crag is called the Mountain Project. And with the history of climbing and sort of completely different direction, they've been refusing to change route names, like really offensive climbing route names. And there's been all sorts of drama, that and really big activism in America. Australia, the culture's been a bit more flexible.
Yeah.
So it's really says a lot about intention and who starts it, doesn't it? You know, when a diverse community is starting a project to begin with, I have the hope that that preserves that joy and preserves that intention and the good direction of it. Anyway, that's the climbing tea, Kel.
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to bring up some of that controversy as well, because I think one of the things I was really excited about by the map, and Ali absolutely brought this up, was you have to build this stuff in at the ground floor. I don't think we could have retrofitted this kind of approach to the existing map, and we certainly wouldn't have gotten cooperation to do that. So yeah, the naming controversy in some of the climbing communities is exactly, as you said, the opposite of what we're trying to do.
But that's the thing about
Cutie.
Suspense.
That's the thing about retrofitting. In amongst all the arguments, if anyone's on the climbing community page, one of Australia's biggest guidebook authors and highly regarded climber, sort of left a comment saying that it's actually up to the guidebook authors that are putting new content out there as well to hold some of that responsibility. He said, I've changed names for less. And that's, you know, that's Simon Mentz. So there's a lot to be said for new iterations of things.
Yeah, absolutely true. That gives me a little bit of hope and faith.
Can I say a couple of things?
Please do.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I've got a handful that I was thought of through that. As somebody who has been in charge of, I think at least 2 Google Map pin maps that became obsolete over time, I'm pretty aware of some of the sort of technical stuff you're talking about and the cultural stuff. And yeah, you're sort of asking about how you can make it easy to maintain. As far as what I've figured out, there is no easy way to do it, but I still think that Google Maps is the right choice because you can be reasonably sure it's going to be there forever. The data can be exported and imported and all that kind of stuff, so you can back it up and you can shift it to a new tool if it comes along, and people know how to use Google tools, so you can kind of teach anyone to do it if you trust them. But yeah, we were talking about comments just a moment ago. I think that as you hope, and you know, we all hope more people, more diverse people come into the community, and you might need to change or add or anything. Yeah, you need some sort of feedback mechanism, whether or not it's, and I don't think you can do comments on a GMAP, but whether it's another Google form, which is simply to say, I would like to make a note about this spot rather than like submit an entire spot. And because just muted myself somehow, because the names are like generally unique, you can just say, you know, what spot are you talking about? And then there's a bit more manual process there. But, you know, to keep the map alive and make sure it doesn't become obsolete, I think some sort of, you know, link in the description or something that has a feedback mechanism that then, yeah, somebody manually has to sit on the other side and maintain. But I think that was going to be important for reaching your goals as well as keeping it growing and relevant. As far as questions to you guys, have you thought about and have you done anything to deal with the concept that a lot of the way we use space is kind of grey? And so, for example, the maps that I've always administrated, we don't publicize the link, and you guys are talking about putting a website up and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people will not take kindly to you advocating for people to go and train on their property. And so we keep our maps semi-private and we send it to people when they come to the city and that kind of stuff, but we don't publicize it. Have you guys got any sort of guidance about what spots you will and won't put on, or like a second layer that's hidden or anything in that sort of regard?
I think we hadn't, we had always thought that it was going to be public. And maybe I would actually maybe be good to chat to you about what experience you've had, because we might change what we're planning to do if you've had issues with that before, potentially. But I think the route we were going down was that we might make it, like if we add a spot, we might make a note. If it's on private property, you might have issues. But that it's, yeah, I think someone brought up the issue of insurance. Who was that? Was that Lima, I think? Liability, and to what extent you're responsible if someone says, oh, they see a spot and then they go train there and then they injure themselves. So yeah, I think that probably does need a bit more thought about. Yep.
I was going to say, wasn't it thought at one point that we would you state whether it's on public or private property? I guess we might need a statement somewhere in there, but like people can make that decision for themselves. If they know they're going to go train on private property, then I guess the assumption, especially, I suppose it's going to be interesting for children, but the assumption that you're taking responsibility for what happens to you there to a certain extent, you know what I mean? Like if I go and train, if I have to climb a 6-foot-high fence to go and train in a school, and I injure myself, I'm hardly going to take it up with them when I've deliberately climbed a 6-foot-high fence to get into that private property. But I guess we should have some sort of statement if it's going to be on a website that maybe explains that for people who, especially maybe with a view towards younger practitioners, about what their responsibilities might be around those things, and clarify any grey areas about that, I suppose.
I mean, Kel knows a bit about the movement card project, and I don't know if you guys are across that because of what Kel's been involved with, but there's guys sort of internationally trying to coordinate a localized, distributed thing of like, okay, here is how training works in your locality. So if you go traveling, you can look up how the law works and all that kind of stuff. And that project might do part of that job for you. But yeah, the liability aspect, I think, is the big one. And I haven't got a solution because I've been grappling with this for 15 years and still essentially rely on keeping things one step away from public and using a network of trust and informal spreading, which makes projects that have an outward public goal really hard. But yeah, you're very easily going to walk into a situation where, oh, WAMP said I should go do this cat pass. WAMP suggested it would be a safe spot to do a cat pass, and the rail broke, and you told me to do this, right? Like it's absurd if it's somebody you know making that claim, but if it's a 14-year-old who's looked it up on the net, and then their mum has heard the story, like they are going to turn around and try and sue you, whoever they can. They'll sue the building owner, they'll sue you, etc. So we haven't had anyone try and sue us, but we've also kept our stuff one step removed. But we have had property owners come at us and say, like, we've seen you post on your social media at our building. Do not bring people to our building. Do not advocate for training on our building, or we will hold you liable for that. And whether that would hold up in court, who knows? Not sure. But if you're saying and you're acknowledging this is private property, then you're almost implicating yourself more by advocating somebody go on private property, which is not necessarily trespass, depending on your local laws, but is still potentially seen as an aggressive action by people who own stuff. So yeah, I would consider it very carefully before doing a public release, how you're going to manage that.
We might need to do some research into what is literally like what local laws are regarding those things as well.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Definitely.
Yeah, and that's state to state, like local trespass and stuff is very state based on its specifics. But in general, you can go somewhere, I'm sure you all know, you go somewhere, get kicked out, come back 24 hours later. But
Yep. Yep.
How publicly you want to advocate that approach to training is also an issue.
I think you're absolutely right, and it is something that Liam has brought up, and we kind of haven't approached properly. One of the next stages of the map will be trying to get funding to create a platform online. And unfortunately, I think some of that funding is going to have to go to a lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think until then, like, call it a Melbourne Parkour spot map. Don't put your names on it. Don't say it's run by WAMP. It's just a thing that exists on the internet, and you can do this Google form and then have to subpoena Google to figure out who's running this.
Yep.
Right, like you can keep that one step of deniability, which sucks because that presentation was excellent and you make some really good points and advocacy, but you can't be publicly doing that advocacy without also solving that issue.
Yep, it sucks. And you're right, Alana, that this is something that the climbing community and other
and some people are just willing to take the risk, right? Like I've done a lot of stuff that could put me in the shit, but I'm like, I care enough about this that I'm going to risk it and hope that everyone I know is trustworthy and nobody's going to be a bad actor. But the more you go big and the more you look for funding, the more you have to grapple with that in worst case scenario terms.
Absolutely. If anyone doesn't know about the Movement Card project, I've just popped a link in the chat now as well. Really recommend checking that out, and hopefully one day we'll get an Australian or local version. But yeah, it's very relevant to this discussion, and a really good project as well.
Just on that subject, I'm wondering, does anyone know what happened with the original Melbourne Parkour map in terms of this issue?
I think it's traceable to anyone. So it's exactly what TJ is saying about being I don't know if there's any names at all on the Melbourne.
I think it also, it does say it's not it's on the Melbourne Parkour page, but the Melbourne Parkour page isn't it's not, is it, or is it not directly affiliated to Melbourne Parkour, or is there something on there that says that it's different? That it's
the Facebook group is definitely not, and yeah, that's enough sort of ambiguity, because I think all the admins of that group almost are not Melbourne Parkour business members.
Yeah,
or whatever.
exactly. So
there's that layer of like, some guy on the internet made this map and I found it, versus you told me to use this map to do this thing.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm wondering, because we currently, as you saw on the beta map, we had like the contributor's name on the map. Maybe we should take that off, especially until we sort it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the other, which is not ideal, is to gate access, right? Like, you don't want to gate access because you're trying to make this accessible. But even something as simple as chuck us an email and we'll add you to the list of people who it's shared to, which, you know, seems innocent enough as like a technological thing about making sure nobody griefs the map and deletes everything. You can use that, like, at least if they've reached out to you, you know, you can be reasonably sure they're a reasonable person, because of that extra step of effort, rather than just random people who don't know anything about you. And that could be your intermediate step without having to like change your content and go backwards at all.
Yeah. Okay, good suggestion.
That's a good possibility. And yeah, I think unfortunately every time you come up with an awesome idea, law whack it in the face, and we have to find workarounds.
And yeah, insurance is the other option. Like, get funding, incorporate the idea enough that you can insure the advice and give the advice in a way that's legally defensible. That's the ultimate end goal. And, you know, I'm sure the APA would be happy to do what it can to facilitate that, because it's a project that could then be replicated all across the country.
Yeah, sweet.
But,
Yeah.
Excellent.
Scott's question. No, absolutely nothing. The guidebook clearly states that it's your own risk and your own decisions, and you're out there and you have to understand your own ability and what's appropriate in scope for you. And this, I think the CRAG has the same disclaimers. And so it seems like there's two kinds of liability issues. The personal risk and injury one is very easily dealt with a general sort of, the creators of this map take absolutely no responsibility for what you choose to do within the scope of your abilities, right? Done, solved. The second one is the private property thing, which also changes over time, much like parkour does, like a spatial change over time problem, that tomorrow something becomes private that wasn't yesterday. So that becomes the matter that perhaps worth concentrating. I have to move so he can't see the screen. If he can see there's people on the screen, he wants part of it. My apologies. But yeah, the private property matter gets a bit hairy, and perhaps a general disclaimer might not get you through. And some general advice will cover it. That's, you know, that's not the same with land trespass in climbing or outdoor sports that you require a guidebook for, because suddenly something is farmland, isn't farmland, there's a negotiation or agreement with landholders or traditional owners or whoever's got the land rights at the time. Suddenly they get sold, that changes, there's a closure, you know, any day of the week, and that also changes over time. So there's more general things.
I think there's different perspective in an urban environment. Like, very rarely does land go public to private, but what about like because I know places take out public liability insurance in case someone trips on their footpath, but that's technically public land. So are there any issues around like involving a spot that we think is pretty public, like it's a park, for instance, or it's, you know, a skate park or something like that, and someone injuring themselves or, you know, accidentally pulling a wall over or something there that I don't understand?
Yeah, it's about who's going to come after you, right? So the council is less likely to want to cause a fuss, but a corporate building manager is absolutely going to want to get every dollar out of you. But yeah, you're at risk even in a council situation for damage. But you generally assume it's not going to be a problem.
I've always wondered that, like, if I'm walking on a railing in a park and the damn thing falls over, do I call it, or do I just walk away really quietly?
Yeah, and that's an ethical question that all of us really should have a better articulation of our position on. But yeah, we grapple with it.
Isn't that safety in design, and that it's totally council's fault?
Well,
yeah, exactly. Like, what are the construction standards? Was it up to standard? Like, if I can break it by my own body weight, then if somebody falling and needed to catch themselves with this handrail and it breaks, like, was it built up to code or not? That's the argument you end up getting in, which is
in the public realm, we generally have to account for stupidity in design to the lowest common denominator, unfortunately, and you have to go on above and beyond. And even if someone does something outrageous and still hurts themselves and kills themselves, God forbid, you're still liable. Designers, the owners, the proponents. So it's like, if you break a rail, Eden, by all means, it's not your fault.
I can tell you where
Eden and I know. I know what rail you're talking about, Eden, as well.
Okay, sorry, I'm on the Zoom.
I think it's great that public design, and I know it probably makes people like your job harder, Alana, but I think it's really fantastic for us that design has to take into account wild situations, because otherwise, you know, every rail you may not be able to balance on, sort of thing. So yeah. I just wanted to cycle back a bit to something that Eden was saying. It was kind of about the difference between public and private land and how it's getting more and more complex. Like, especially, not so much in a city like Melbourne, but very much in London, I know. There's a sort of private kind of land, like private land that looks like public land. And seems to operate in the way that public land does. So a park that's actually privately owned. So I think it's already a complex question, and B, it's getting more and more complicated as cities change. I don't know what that means for the map in the future. I'm worried, but it's going to be fine.
Thanks, Cal.
I'm going to head out to a training session, but I just want to say excellent work to all of you. You've done a really, really good job on this, and backed up your assertions and your reasoning really well as well.
Much.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming, TJ.
I'll be tuning back in at 5 o'clock my time to hear Liam talk, so
yes,
I can see what he's done with the quals. So I've been very busy otherwise, so I'll probably see a bunch of you then.
Okay, amazing. See you later.
See you in a bit.
Kind of feels like the same change over time matter, though, you know? Like, you publish something and it's current and valid only at the time of publication, and anything happens a second afterwards, you take no responsibility for.
Mm.
Well, maybe that would feed back into having like regular known updates to the map so that you know when it was last valid.
That's an excellent point, and also one that Di brought up in the chat a while back, and it got sort of lost. But yeah, Di suggested regular surveys or regular known dates at which the map will be audited, I suppose. And that's an excellent point, and I'd just like to recognise that one, because great work, Diana. The shape of what that is can also change, like according to what the community wants and responds well to, I suppose, and how locked down we are if we ever get out of it.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Can
Hey.
you?
Did you have a sort of suggestion for a format for a
Yeah, well, I wanted to add with the conversation of liabilities and I guess, insurance and the law, how that relationship with the map. And I guess one of the first things that people tend to do is just have a general guideline of code. So if you're using this map, this is what the behavior you're expected to have. Any behavior that falls outside of this, then it's not our problem, it's your problem. But I guess that also puts the question of like, is this going to be policed? Like, who's policing this now? So if there is a code of conduct, it could be something that you just say that people do, and it kind of covers the aspect of the misuse of the map. But is it going to be used in practice? Maybe not, maybe yes, but that could be a consideration to have, of just several points that indicate the expected behavior that people have that's respectful to the law and to the property. And I think it's something that already people know in some extent. Like, if the police tells you to leave, be kind, be aware, just leave, X, Y, Z. Just another thing to add to the discussion of how liabilities fall on the map.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
And yeah, just to cycle back to the movement card, that has some of that information in that project as well. So I think what we're doing is dovetailing a lot with the movement card, and we should definitely try and get one developed for Melbourne. But you're absolutely right. I think, unfortunately, some of this, when we think about accessibility, some of it, what am I trying to say? Pardon me. Like, the last thing we want to do is make anyone who uses the map have to read pages and pages of documents, or contribute to the map to read pages and pages of documents, because some people can't that way, or just don't want to, don't have the time. So I think if our basic assumption is inclusivity, we may well have to think about, can we make a code of conduct video? Although that sounds like a horrible thing to have to make. Or can we communicate it through design in a way that's not going to be torturous for people with dyslexia or whatever? So Ooh,
Interesting.
good call.
Is this Alana's comment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. There's kind of a tension between wanting to stay out of sight because we don't have to worry about insurance and legality, but also wanting to be able to communicate our values to the world. So, Ali, maybe you should say something. You're the smart one here.
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely think, because the approach that TJ was suggesting was sending it to people that you know, and you're more likely to know people like you, and so that immediately creates a yeah, exactly. It's just like it's an echo chamber. So definitely, if we want to be starting to include people beyond that sector of society that is more likely to do parkour and get involved in it through their friends, then yeah, then definitely going public would be better for that aim. And it could even be like a point of entry. Like, if people who are interested in parkour might find the map and think, oh, look, there's a spot near my house, I might go try some of the things. But then I just thought that would raise a whole lot of things about, like, you know, injuring yourself if you don't know how to do the technique properly. Yeah, so it's definitely a tough one.
Don't forget, that's the same with climbing. Like, if you don't know anything about what you're doing, the grievous bodily harm is far worse than what you could accomplish with parkour, you know, to unimaginable details. Like, and I assure you that the 70s stoners who started climbing routes all over the world weren't having these conversations, weren't having WamJams, weren't having, you know, collective mapping projects with diverse participants, weren't having input. Like, already the intention is in a much better position.
Yeah, true.
I mean, that's good. I mean, at least we don't have some of the names of spots like that. I suppose most of our spots are named after what's there, but Yeah, you're absolutely right. We can be grateful for all the progress that we've made and are working towards, while still acknowledging.
To the earlier comment on code of conduct, like some surf breaks that are really popular have signage about what is the code of conduct in the surfing lineup. It's kind of generally expected that you know it, and surf shops educate people about that, and infographics are disseminated, but sometimes it's plastered up on the beach with diagrams. You know?
Actually, that's a great comparison, and I might get some of those as examples of clear language. And Scott's just made a comment about projects that have a lengthy code of conduct with a summary first, and so that's another excellent way to do it. To put the too long didn't read at the start, and then anyone who's more interested in the details can. Oh, great! Similar with skate spots as well. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. And I'm actually from memory, the Fremantle Parkour Park has a similar thing as well. So there are lots of both design and writing examples that we can mine for, and plagiarize.
Plagiarize. Just change the word from skateboard.
Yeah. Just cross it out with a Sharpie.
Yeah. A lot of fun. Yeah, snowboard parks have them as well.
Say again, Edith?
Snowboard parks have them as well.
Yeah. So I might start collecting some of those. Google image search. Why? Thanks, Scott. Hard to amend with a Sharpie. I'll try on there. One thing I might like to ask before we sort of wrap up, I don't know how long people want to keep Q&A-ing, but I'd have a question if anyone has any specific instances of what they would like out of a parkour map that maybe isn't a standard issue thing. So we, as Ali said, we've got tried to get information on public toilets, drinking fountains, the state of the footpath, lighting, safety considerations, like is it too close to a police station, or is it in a blind alley or something? So is there anything on that front that you would like to see added to a parkour map, or a map that's for play? No, that's fine.
Or even what do you think you might use the map for? You think you might use it?
That's an excellent point, Scott.
Public.
Scott's just put a comment about putting an overlay on the map of public toilets and other information in the same way that we currently have an overlay of the traditional owners' boundaries.
Actually, one more layer of public facilities would almost negate needing to take. You could almost take that category out of the description then, if that layer is readily available.
I've had a look. I don't know if there is a Melbourne public toilet Google map. I know there are several. I don't know if there's a singular one. Okay, sorry, I may be wrong. OSM. What's an OSM?
Open Street Map.
Okay.
Not always super accurate, but it does have a lot of data that you can download in really comfortable GIS formats. So if you're doing kind of more generic overlays, and then makes for much quicker updates as well.
All right, well worth looking into.
But it's a bit of data to juggle.
Yeah.
It's worth though, however, keeping still the written descriptions and visual, just from an accessibility perspective, because some people might have text readers or something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking more for like public facilities like drinking fountains and toilets, so you can already see them marked on the map when you look at a spot, maybe.
Yeah, no, I mean it for both.
Oh yeah, okay, yep, cool.
Yeah, definitely something.
Ivy's also made an excellent point. Maybe foot traffic depends on the day. So I know in some spots I've been like, don't bother going there on the weekend.
Yeah, I've been doing the same. I'm like, don't go there when it's open, go there when it's closed.
Yeah. So yeah, there are several spots that have that information if it's relevant to the spot, but it's definitely worth including information like that.
What about like the Google traffic data integration? Is that a doable thing, the facility? So, you know, already Google gives you, Ali's like, more information.
Google traffic's only relevant to people who have their locations turned on though, so.
Oh, Lord knows from which direction our data is being mined these days.
Yeah, but also like, does it give pedestrian traffic? Or does it only give vehicle traffic?
I think at the moment it's just vehicle traffic because it would validate too many tinfoil hats. But you know, I think that says a lot, right? If it's a busy road, busy corner, you're seeing lots of red and orange lines, it's probably not going to be a relaxing training session. And you can sort of extrapolate what is going to be happening on the footpath.
I don't know. See, but it, like say there's a park next to Alexandra Parade. That's going to be permanently red and orange, but the park itself might have like 3 people in it. So.
Well, it's a big park, right? So then you know it's so far from the road and.
Well, I'm talking about a literal example, like near where Kel lives. There's literally a park on Alexandra Parade, like on the edge of the road, that has like, I think maybe I've seen like 2 or 3 groups of people down there. The playground might have kids in it, but it's going to always have those red traffic lines next to it because it's right in that section where everything slows down to freaking 50 kilometers an hour, having done 100. So it's permanently gridlocked.
Yeah, so, I know that one. You're absolutely right. The park itself doesn't ever really get crowded, but it does often get loud enough from traffic noise that some people would.
Okay, yeah, I guess it's a consideration. I haven't. So yeah, it feeds back into what Ali says about you consider things from your own perspective, I suppose. So
that would feed into accessibility, then, you know, if it's a noise concern.
So yeah, there's another avenue to look at. I'm just going to make a note here.
Look at Google for all its data. It's milking you. You take some back.
Got a point.
Ivy says, to some extent, you'd better be better off using coding with the amount of info you want to chunk in later. Yes, that's true.
I don't know. Like GIS is pretty easy to thing, but I don't know. Is there going to be a limit on how much information we can put onto our Google Mind Map? Does it have I know it has a maximum layer amount limit of 5 meg that you can add in a layer, but what about like, are we going to hit some sort of total data storage at some point?
Yeah, it's probably, especially if we're going to be archiving spots.
Yeah, and is it going to go up to a point where we add like 5, 6, 7, 10 layers to the map and it suddenly goes, yep, your map's big enough, you can't add more, sorry, bye.
Yeah, so that would be something to think about. We suppose we have to be really considered about what we want to include. Like if we include public toilet overlays, is that going to be eating up space?
Yeah.
Yeah.
By that point, would you be ready for your own standalone hosting though?
Well, that's something we could look into getting funding for, like you said. Maybe we can get funding for a new upgrade, paid, more space version of a Google My Map or something like that.
Yeah, they're all options, and I think it's really great to have this beta map, and Ali's always referred to this as a beta map, a beta version, and we're nowhere near the alpha. I don't know, what's the non-beta called? Is it called?
Yeah. What is it? Which way is it?
So yeah, all of these things are going to be
Yep.
down the line, and hopefully that will be with more resources and more people on the team who know what GIS means. I don't know what the acronyms are.
Traffic information systems.
What's Scott saying, I may have missed this in an earlier bit, is there some kind of project document or Kanban listing the outstanding issues so that people in the community are able to help out? Wait, do you reckon you could expand on that a bit more, Scott? What, because I don't think we do have something with outstanding issues yet. We came up with a few in the reflection process, but it'd be cool to hear what you're thinking of with that suggestion. Okay, maybe Scott can't unmute. That's all good.
Well, I think when it comes to like user issues for the map, because everyone who is using the map is currently also contributing to the map, user issues haven't come up yet.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, that's here.
That's all good. Yeah, that you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I mean, it seems like the project isn't kind of in the stage where where it has like a big wish list of things which are like either nice to have or like current issues with the map. But that's generally the point at which things just kind of get lost when they're not written down somewhere. That's all. So just something to maybe think about.
Yeah, definitely.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah, and I think this comes back to the fact that we're a very informal group, and so we don't have a defined structure for organization or making decisions, and so that's potentially going to be an interesting issue, because at the moment I think it's such a small group. It's kind of just the people who are wanting to contribute are getting involved, and then depending on how much you're invested in it, you're making more or less decisions, or getting asked more or less your opinion. But yeah, I wonder if that's something maybe we're going to need to consider. Like, I don't know if formalizing it a bit more is going to make it less attractive to get involved, or if it's actually, or if it's going to help things, or so that might be something to discuss.
I think that back to the question how big you want to aim for, because if you want to make it pretty big, then you better manage it like a project management, because if you make something big, it's going to get messy if you have no idea what's going on there. But if you just wanted to make, well content, then I don't know, with like few people's enthusiasm, it's pretty good. It's like, it's fine, because you know what's going on, you know who's involved. It's pretty easy to manage. Yeah.
Yeah, true. I suppose we have to define what we want to, how much time and energy we want to allocate to this, and if it's going to be proportional to how much it's going to get used as well. Because we could go all out and like hire coders and go crazy, but we could have like 20 people use it ever. So yeah, I suppose that's another discussion to have.
And I think you guys are all like volunteer at this moment, and at some stage if it's getting bigger, then it's much more work and effort and time to put into, and it might not be a part-time or casual job in this. It might be a full-time volume. You have to expect that.
So true. Yeah, it's already feeling, I think I spent all of my spare time this week on this presentation.
So I think there's a balance between just don't get too big, or work-life balance, because you're going to burn out, and then you don't want to end this project because there's only a few people manage these, and if you all burn out, it's just going to end. That's
So,
my 5 cents.
yeah, it's a really good point. Something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that front, it's worth doing as early as possible because sustainability in that way is easier to do on the ground floor rather than attempting to retrofit it. So you're right, that's a major consideration.
And adding to that, the Trello card, it's not necessarily a project management, but it's more like I would say visualization of how many tasks you want to do and how to prioritize something, and you know how many in the backlog, how many you want to do it right now, things like that. It's like a bit of planning.
Yeah, it could be.
That's an excellent.
Also, it's free, so you can keep it like private to a few people. So it's like it's more like your own notebook and something like that. It doesn't need to be public or be super professional, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be really good. Good way to see, everyone can see what's happening at the same time. Because at the moment, I think I've got a few Google Sheets and Gantt charts and things, but they're probably not shared that widely. So not everyone, even because then if we've got a Trello board, at least people who are just involved a little bit can still see the big picture.
Yeah, you can definitely set separate boards, like one for public of what's going on at the moment, and one for private on more detailed work you're planning to do and something like that.
Yeah, cool. Look into that.
Sorry, this is very project management and inside.
I'm all for it.
I love project management.